Alicia, speak in front of everyone. Oh, please. She's not sharp enough to string a sentence together without tripping over her own words. James's mocking laugh sliced through the glittering gala, his colleagues chuckling as Alicia stood silently beside him, her face a mask of composure, hiding a storm within. He waved her off, grinning. Just stand there and look pretty. Darling, that's your talent. The crowd's laughter stung, but Alicia's eyes flickered with something unspoken as James strutted to the stage. Eager to claim the spotlight, the microphone was unexpectedly handed to Alicia. Unbeknownst to him, a powerful figure watched his cruel jest from the shadows, seeing through his so-called humor. What unfolds will leave James reeling. A reckoning awaits. If this hooks you, subscribe and share where you're listening from, day or night. Will Alicia rise, or will James's arrogance prevail? Stick around to find out. The gala's golden glow bathed the grand ballroom, chandelier casting intricate patterns across polished marble floors. Laughter and the clink of champagne flutes filled the air, a symphony of wealth and ambition. James Hartley, a rising star in the corporate world, stood near the stage, his tailored suit accentuating his confident posture. His dark eyes sparkled with self-assured charm as he held court among colleagues, their faces alight with amusement at his every word. Beside him, Alicia, his wife, stood like a shadow, her elegant navy gown clinging softly to her frame. Her auburn hair caught the light, but her expression was guarded, her hands clasped tightly before her, betraying the storm beneath her calm exterior. Emma, a young associate with a sharp mind and sharper curiosity, leaned forward, her glass tilted slightly. James, she said, her voice cutting through the group's chatter, why don't you let Alicia present the team's pitch tonight? She's been working on the sustainability project, too, hasn't she? The question hung in the air, innocent, yet pointed, and the group's eyes flicked to Alicia, who offered a faint, polite smile. James's laugh erupted, sharp and dismissive, slicing through the moment like a blade. Alicia, present. He turned to her, his grin more a sneer, his voice dripping with condescension. Oh, Emma, you're sweet, but let's be real. Alicia's not cut out for that. She'd fumble her words and make us all look like amateurs, right? Darling. He draped an arm around Alicia's shoulders, the gesture more possessive than affectionate. Just stand there and look pretty. That's what you're good at. Laughter burst from the group, a cruel chorus that echoed off the crystal chandeliers. A few colleagues exchanged knowing glances, their smirks feeding James's ego. Alicia's cheeks flushed, a faint pink blooming beneath her composed facade, but her eyes remained fixed on the floor, her fingers tightening around the delicate stem of her champagne flute. The weight of their amusement pressed against her, each chuckle a pinprick to her dignity. Yet she stood motionless, her silence louder than their mockery. James, emboldened by the crowd's reaction, leaned closer to his colleagues, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial tone. Honestly, she's better off leaving the big stuff to me. I mean, have you seen her try to keep up in a meeting? It's like watching a deer in headlights. Another round of laughter followed, louder this time, and even Emma's smile faltered, her brow creasing with discomfort. Alicia's hand trembled slightly, the champagne rippling in her glass, but her face remained a mask of serenity. Her eyes betraying a flicker of something, resolve perhaps, or restrained fury, unseen by James. A figure stood just beyond the circle of light. Her presence, commanding yet understated, Dr. Eleanor Vance, the evening's keynote speaker and a titan in the industry, observed the scene with piercing gray eyes. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant shiny, and her tailored black suit exuded authority. She had mentored Alicia years ago, recognizing a brilliance that others overlooked. And now she watched as James's words cut deeper, each one a betrayal disguised as humor. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she remained silent, her gaze shifting to Alicia, who stood like a statue under the weight of her husband's scorn. James, oblivious to the scrutiny, raised his glass, his voice carrying a mock toast to my wife, the best accessory a man could ask for. The group erupted. Again, their laughter, a venomous tide, and Alicia's fingers tightened until her knuckles widened. She lifted her eyes, briefly meeting Emma's, who offered a fleeting look of sympathy before turning away. Unable to bridge the gap between them, Alicia's heart pounded, a drumbeat added of humiliation and defiance. But she held her ground, her silence as shield against the onslaught. The air shifted subtly, the crowd's attention drawn to the stage as the host, a distinguished man in a crisp tuxedo, stepped forward, his voice cutting through the den. "Ladies and gentlemen, a moment, please," he called, his tone warm yet authoritative. James straightened, his chest puffing slightly, certain he was about to be summoned for the team's presentation. He adjusted his tie, his grin widening. As he prepared to bask in the spotlight, Alicia's gaze lifted, her eyes catching the light, a quiet storm brewing within them. She knew the project inside and out, had poured hours into its details, while James took credit for her work. Her silence had never been weakness, but a choice. One she was beginning to question. As the host's voice echoed, the room seemed to hold its breath, and Dr. Vance's eyes narrowed to her presence, a silent promise of justice. James's laughter still lingered in the air, but it was about to meet its match. Alicia's moment was coming, and with it, a reckoning that would unravel the man who thought he could diminish her. The stage was set, and the shadows were watching. The gala's energy pulsed on, a glittering whirl of clinking glasses and murmured ambition. But the air around James's circle grew sharp, charged with the venom of his words. He stood at the center, his arms still loosely draped around Alicia's shoulders, though the gesture felt more like a chain than a caress. His colleagues leaned in, their laughter fueling his bravado, their eyes glinting with the cruel amusement of those who revel in another's diminishment. Alicia stood beside him, her navy gown, a quiet elegance against the storm of his mockery, her face, a study in composure, though her fingers betrayed her, curling tightly around the stem of her champagne flute, the liquid within, trembling with each barb. James, emboldened by the crowd's response, leaned closer to his colleagues, his voice a theatrical whisper that carried just far enough to sting. "I mean, really," he said, his lips curling into a smirk. "Alicia is sweet, but brains, not her forte. Have you ever seen her try to explain a project timeline? It's like watching a child recite poetry. She doesn't understand." The group erupted again, their chuckles a jagged edge, slicing through the warm glow of the chandeliers. A man in a pinstripe suit slapped James's shoulder, grinning, while a woman in emerald silk stifled a giggle behind her glass. Emma, the young associate who had sparked this cruel spectacle, shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting to Alicia, whose silence seemed to deepen the room's noise. Alicia's heart thudded, each laugh a hammer against her resolve, but her face remained serene, a porcelain mask hiding the fire within. Her eyes, though, flickered with a quiet defiance, catching the light as they darted to the floor, then back to the faces around her. She knew every detail of the sustainability project James claimed as his own, every statistic, every strategy, every late night she'd spent refining it while he basked in the credit. His words weren't just cruel. They were a theft, a dismissal of her mind and her worth. Yet she stood still, her breath steady, her silence a choice she wielded like a blade, not yet drawn. Dr. Eleanor Vance lingered just beyond the circle, her presence a shadow unnoticed by James, her gray eyes sharp as flint, took in every word, every laugh, every subtle shift in Alicia's posture. She remembered the young woman she'd mentored years ago, a mind so brilliant it had startled her, a spirit so resilient it had inspired her. Now, watching Alicia endure this public humiliation, Vance's jaw tightened, her fingers brushing the edge of her glass. With restrained fury, she saw through James's charm, his so-called humor, a flimsy veil for insecurity, and she saw Alicia's strength coiled like a spring. Beneath her calm exterior, Vance's silence was not indifference. It was calculation, a promise of justice, brewing in the wings. James, oblivious to the scrutiny, raised his glass again, his voice growing bolder. Let's just say Alicia's better suited to smiling and nodding. Keeps things simple, doesn't it, darling? He squeezed her shoulder, his grin a challenge, daring her to react. The group laughed again, though Emma's smile had vanished entirely, then her discomfort. Now, plain as she glanced at Alicia, searching for a crack in her composure. But Alicia offered nothing, her lips pressed into a faint, enigmatic curve, her eyes fixed on a distant point, as if she were somewhere else entirely. A place where James's words, it couldn't reach her. Inside, Alicia burned. Each word was a wound, each laugh a weight. But she refused to crumble. She thought of the hours she'd spent poring over data, crafting the very presentation James planned to deliver. Her ideas woven into every slide he'd claim as his own. She let him take the spotlight, not out of weakness, but out of love. A hope that he'd see her as more than a prop. Now that hope flickered, threatening to gut her out. Her fingers tightened around her glass, the cool crystal grounding her as she anchored herself against the tide of humiliation. Dr. Vance's gaze never wavered, her mind cataloging James's every word, his every gesture. She saw the way Alicia stood, not broken, but unbowed, her silence of power. James couldn't comprehend. Vance knew the moment was coming, knew it as surely as she knew the rhythm of her own breath. The stage was set, and Alicia, whether she realized it or not, was about to claim it. James' laughter, so loud and careless, was a spark that would soon ignite a fire he couldn't extinguish. The crowd's attention shifted as the host's voice crackled through the speakers, a prelude to the evening's main event. James straightened, his chest swelling with anticipation. Certain his moment was near, he released Alicia's shoulder, Already imagining the applause that would greet his presentation, Alicia's eyes lifted, meeting Emma's for a fleeting moment, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The air grew taut, the room holding its breath as the host's words loomed. James's mockery had built a stage, but it was Alicia who would soon stand upon it, and the shadows watching would ensure his reckoning was unforgettable. The gala's energy thrummed, a living pulse of anticipation, as the host's voice cut through the hum of conversation, drawing every eye to the stage. James stood tall, his posture radiating confidence, his fingers brushing the edge of his tie as he prepared to claim the spotlight he believed was his. Alicia lingered at his side, her navy gown, a quiet contrast to the glittering crowd, her hands no longer clutching her glass, but resting calmly at her sides. Her face remained serene, but her eyes held the glint of something fierce, a spark that flickered in the chandelier's glow, unnoticed by the man who thought he knew her limits. The host, a silver-haired man with a commanding presence, adjusted his glasses and smiled broadly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonating with authority, "we have a change to tonight's program due to an unforeseen scheduling conflict. James Hartley will not be presenting the sustainability project." A murmur rippled through the crowd, heads turning, glasses pausing mid-sip. James's smile froze, his brow furrowing as he leaned forward, certain he'd misheard. The host continued, his tone unwavering. "Instead, we're honored to have Alicia Hartley represent the team." The room seemed to tilt, the air thickening with surprise. James's head snapped toward Alicia, his eyes wide with disbelief, a flush creeping up his neck. "What?" he hissed, his voice low but sharp, "meant only for her. This is a mistake. You can't do this." Alicia met his gaze, her expression unreadable, but her silence carried a weight that made his chest tighten. She offered a single measured nod, her lips curving faintly, not in submission, but in resolve. Without a word, she stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the marble as she moved toward the stage. James grabbed her arm, his grip firm but not painful, his voice a desperate whisper. "Alicia, don't make a fool of us. Just read the slides. Keep it short. You're not cut out for this, and you know it." His words were a plea cloaked in command, his eyes darting to the crowd, already imagining the humiliation if she faltered. Alicia paused, her gaze locking onto his, and for a moment, something passed between them, a challenge, a reckoning. "Let go, James," she said softly, her voice steady, cutting through his panic like a blade through silk. He released her, his hand falling limply as she turned and ascended the stage. The crowd watched, a mix of curiosity and skepticism in their eyes. Emma, standing near the front, clasped her hands tightly, her earlier discomfort now replaced by a flicker of hope. Other colleagues whispered, some doubting Alicia's ability, their expectations shaped by James's cruel jest. Dr. Eleanor Vance stood at the edge of the room, her gray eyes fixed on Alicia, a faint smile tugging at her lips. She knew what Alicia was capable of, had seen it years ago when she'd mentored her, and now she waited, her presence a silent anchor in the storm of anticipation. Alicia reached the podium, the spotlight bathing her in a warm glow. She adjusted the microphone, her movements deliberate, her posture unyielding. The room fell silent, the weight of expectation pressing against her. But she stood tall, her breath steady. She could feel James's eyes boring into her, could sense the crowd's doubt, but she pushed it all aside. This was her moment. Not his, not theirs, but hers. She thought of the nights spent poring over the project, the ideas she'd crafted, the vision she'd poured her heart into, only for James to claim it as his own. No more. Ladies and gentlemen, Alicia began, her voice clear and resonant, carrying a quiet authority that stilled the room. Tonight, I'm here to share our team's vision for sustainable innovation, a vision that redefines how we build, create, and thrive. Her words flowed effortlessly, each syllable measured yet vibrant, weaving data with passion, strategy with story. She spoke of renewable energy, models, citing figures with precision, then softened her tone with a witty anecdote about a late-night brainstorming session, drawing laughter from the crowd. Not mocking, but warm, genuine. James stood rooted, and his jaw tightening as Alicia's voice filled the room, her confidence, a stark contrast to the woman he dismissed. The crowd leaned forward, captivated, nodding as she outlined complex strategies with clarity that made them seem simple. Emma's eyes shone with admiration, and even the colleagues who'd laughed at James's now exchanged glances, their skepticism melting into respect. Alicia's words painted a future bold, achievable, inspiring, and with each sentence, she dismantled the caricature James had crafted of her. Dr. Vance watched, her arms crossed, her smile growing. She saw the Alicia she'd known years ago, the one who devoured research papers and challenged her in debates, now standing before a room that had underestimated her. James's face grew ashen, his earlier swagger replaced by a creeping dread. He'd expected her to falter, to prove his words true. But instead, she was stealing the stage he'd claimed as his own. The crowd's applause grew louder, a wave of approval that drowned out his earlier laughter. Alicia paused, her eyes sweeping the room, lingering briefly on James. In that moment, she wasn't just speaking to the audience. She was speaking to him, to every moment he'd belittled her, every time he'd reduced her to a prop. Her voice grew stronger, her final words of promise. This is only the beginning. The room held its breath, the applause waiting to erupt, and Dr. Vance's gaze sharpened, knowing the tide had turned. James's world was about to unravel, and Alicia was the one holding the thread. The spotlight held Alicia in its embrace, her voice still echoing in the hushed ballroom as she concluded her presentation with a quiet, resolute, "This is only the beginning." The words hung in the air, a challenge and a promise, igniting a spark that set the room ablaze with applause. The crowds surged to their feet, their claps a thunderous wave, their faces alight with admiration for the woman they'd underestimated moments before. Alicia stood tall at the podium, her navy gown shimmering under the chandelier's glow, her eyes bright with a fire that had been smoldering too long. She was no longer the silent figure at James' side. She was a force, radiant and undeniable. James stood frozen below, his hands clenched at his sides, the applause of blade twisting in his gut. His earlier smirk had vanished, replaced by a pallor that betrayed his shock. He'd expected Alicia to stumble, to prove his cruel jest true. But instead, she'd woven a tapestry of intellect and charisma that left the room spellbound. His colleagues, who'd laughed at his mockery, now turned to him with raised brows and whispered aids, their amusement replaced by something sharper, judgment. Emma, the young associate, clapped fervently, her eyes shining with pride, her earlier discomfort forgotten. In the wake of Alicia's triumph, Alicia's gaze swept the room, pausing briefly on James. It wasn't a look of triumph or spite, but something colder, a quiet acknowledgement of his betrayal, a severance of the invisible chain he'd held her with. She stepped back from the podium, her movements graceful, that her composure unshaken as the applause swelled. The host nodded approvingly from the wings. But it was another figure who commanded the room's attention next. Dr. Eleanor Vance, the industry titan, rose from her seat at the edge of the crowd, her slow, deliberate claps cutting through the den. Like a gavel, the room fell silent, every eye turning to Vance as she strode toward the stage, her silver hair catching the light, her presence a force of nature. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice rich and commanding. I've mentored many brilliant minds in my career, but few have the intellect and vision of Alicia Hartley. Her words landed like stones, each one sinking James deeper into his own disgrace. I worked with her years ago, saw her potential then, and tonight, she's proven it beyond doubt. This industry needs voices like hers, bold, insightful, transformative. The crowd erupted again, their applause, a tidal wave, and Alicia's lips parted in a faint, genuine smile, her heart swelling under Vance's endorsement. James's face burned, his jaw tight, as he watched Vance place a hand on Alicia's shoulder, a gesture of pride and solidarity. He felt the room shift. Around him, the colleagues who'd once hung on his every word, now gravitating toward Alicia, their whispers a chorus of praise. She was incredible. One said, "Why didn't we know she was this good?" Another murmured. Emma caught James's eye, her expression no longer sympathetic, but accusatory, as if she saw him for what he was, a man who'd built his throne on the belittlement of his wife. Vance continued, her voice cutting through the room's buzz. I'm announcing a new initiative tonight, one that will redefine sustainable innovation, and I can think of no one better to co-lead it than Alicia Hartley, whose expertise is frankly unparalleled. The crowd gasped, then clapped again. The sound, a hammer against James's pride. He stood rooted, his tie suddenly too tight, his breath shallow. Alicia, his wife, the woman he'd called not sharp enough, was now the center of the industry's future. Anointed by a legend, his world tilted, the ground beneath him crumbling. Alicia descended the stage, her head high, colleagues swarming to congratulate her. Emma reached her, first grasping her hand. You were amazing. Alicia, I knew you had it in you. Alicia smiled, her voice soft, but firm. Thank you. Emma, it means more than you know. Vance pulled her aside, her gray eyes warm. You've always been exceptional. Alicia, don't let anyone dim your light. Not ever. Alicia nodded, her throat tight with gratitude. That her heart all light with a newfound certainty. She was done hiding, done letting James define her worth. James pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of desperation. Alicia, he stammered, his voice barely audible over the hum of admiration surrounding her. I didn't know you could do that. His words were feeble, a plea for forgiveness he hadn't earned. Alicia turned, her gaze icy, cutting through his faltering charm. You didn't know, James, because you never asked. You assumed I was nothing, because you never saw me. Her voice was calm, but each word was a dagger, piercing the facade he'd built. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His colleagues' eyes burning into him, their respect slipping away, like sand. The crowd parted as Alicia moved past him, her steps deliberate, her presence commanding. James stood alone, the applause for Alicia echoing in his ears, a mocking reminder of his miscalculation. Dr. Vance's gaze lingered on him, her expression unreadable but heavy with disdain. She'd seen his cruelty, his arrogance, and now she'd ensured the room saw Alicia's brilliance. The stage he thought was his had become hers, and the laughter that once bolstered him now mocked him instead. Alicia's victory was undeniable, but the night's reckoning was far from over, and James's fall was only beginning. The gala's final notes faded, the chandeliers dimming as guests drifted toward the exits, their voices a low hum of excitement over Alicia's triumph. James stood alone in a corner, the echo of applause for his wife ringing in his ears like a taunt. His tailored suit, once a symbol of his rising star, now felt like a costume, ill-fitting and heavy. Alicia, surrounded by colleagues, and Dr. Vance glowed with a radiance that seemed to pull the room's light toward her. Her navy gown caught the fading glow, and her laughter, soft, genuine, pierced James's chest as she accepted congratulations. He tried to approach, his steps hesitant, his voice a weak plea. "Alicia, we need to talk," he called, but she glided past, her eyes brushing over him with a coldness that left him breathless. The colleagues who'd once laughed at his jest now turned away, their whispers sharp with judgment. James followed her through the crowd, his heart pounding with a mix of desperation and dread. The night had unraveled him, each clap for Alicia a blow to his carefully crafted image. He caught Emma's eye, hoping for a shred of sympathy, but she looked through him to her allegiance, now with the woman he dismissed. The weight of their disdain pressed against him, a tide he couldn't stem. Alicia paused at the ballroom's edge, speaking briefly with Dr. Vance, who nodded with a mentor's pride. Then, without a glance back, Alicia stepped into the cool night air, leaving James to trail behind, a shadow of the man he'd been hours ago. At home, the silence of their sleek apartment was suffocating. James sat in the darkened living room, a glass of whiskey trembling in his hand, the amber liquid catching the faint glow of a single lamp. The room, once a stage for his charm, now felt like a tomb, its modern lines stark and unforgiving. Alicia interred, her gown still impeccable, but her face was a fortress, her eyes sharp with a clarity that unnerved him. She stood across from him, her arms crossed, her silence a challenge. James set his glass down, the clink loud in the quiet. "Alicia," he began, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean it. Those things I said, they were just jokes. I didn't know you were that good." Alicia's lips parted, but not in softness. Her voice, when it came, was steady, each word deliberate, cutting through his flimsy defense. "Jokes, James, calling me stupid, saying I'm only good for looking pretty. That's not humor. That's contempt." She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering, pinning him to the spot. "You thought I was nothing, that I'd embarrass you, but tonight I showed everyone who I am, and you showed them who you are." Her words were a mirror, reflecting his cruelty back at him, and he flinched, unable to meet her eyes. James stood, his hands outstretched, pleading. "Alicia, I was wrong. I didn't see it. Your talent, your strength. Give me a chance to make this, right? His voice trembled, but it carried no weight, hollowed out by the memory of his laughter at the gala. Alicia shook her head, her auburn hair catching the lamplight, her expression unyielding. You didn't see me because you didn't want to. I spent years supporting you, refining your work, letting you take the credit, and you repaid me with humiliation. She paused, her voice softening but not weakening. I'm done proving myself to you, James. I'm done being your shadow. The words landed like a verdict, final and unappealing. James' knees weakened, and he sank back into the chair. His whiskey forgotten, he saw her then. Not the prop he'd made her, but the woman who'd commanded a room, who'd earned Dr. Vance's praise. The realization clawed at him. He'd misused her, and the cost was only beginning to reveal itself. Alicia turned to her heels, clicking against the hardwood as she moved toward the hallway. I'm staying with a friend. Tonight, she said, her voice calm but resolute. We'll talk later when I'm ready. The door closed behind her, the sound echoing like a gavel in his mind. James sat alone, the apartment silence, swallowing him whole. He replayed the gala, his mocking laughter, the crowd's cruel amusement, Alicia's unflinching grace on stage. He thought himself untouchable, the charming executive destined for greatness. But now, he was a man exposed, his arrogance laid bare. Outside the city, lights glittered, indifferent to his unraveling. He thought of his colleagues, whispers, their eyes, that no longer met his, and a cold dread settled in his chest. Alicia had stepped into the light, and he was left in the dark, grasping at a marriage and a reputation slipping through his fingers. Alicia, meanwhile, stepped into the night, her breath visible in the cool air. She clutched her coat tighter, not against the chill, but to steady the fire within her. Dr. Vance's words echoed in her mind. Don't let anyone dim your light. And for the first time in years, she felt unshackled. She'd endured James' barbs, his dismissal, but tonight, she'd seen him for what he was. A man who needed to diminish her to feel the gala had been her awakening. And as she walked toward a new dawn, I knew there was no going back. James's reckoning was just beginning, and she would face it on her terms, not his. The city skyline glittered beyond the glass walls of the corporate office, but for James, the view was a mockery, its brilliance underscoring his dimming star. Days had passed since the gala, yet the sting of Alicia's triumph and his own humiliation clung to him like damp fog. The office, once a stage for his charisma, now buzzed with whispers that trailed him like shadows. Colleagues who once clapped his back now offered curt nods, their eyes sliding away, their conversations halting when he approached. The air was thick with judgment, and James felt it in every glance, every hushed word about the night he'd mocked his wife, only to watch her steal the spotlight. He sat at his desk, the polished mahogany, a cold comfort, his inbox overflowing with routine tasks that felt beneath him. His phone vibrated, a message from a colleague canceling a lunch meeting. The excuse flimsy and pointed. James's jaw tightened, his fingers hovering over the screen as he considered texting Alicia again. Her words from that night, "I'm done proving myself to you," echoed in his mind. A verdict he couldn't escape. He'd sent her a message that morning, a halting apology. "Alicia, Lou was wrong. Please, let's talk." No reply. The silence was louder than any rebuke, and it gnawed at him, a reminder of the chasm he'd carved between them. The door to his office swung open, and Mr. Carter, his boss, stood framed in the doorway, his expression stern. James, a word. The older man's voice was clipped, his gray suit as unyielding as his demeanor. James rose, smoothing his tie, but the gesture felt hollow, a remnant of the confidence he'd lost. They walked to Carter's corner office, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city's pulse. Carter didn't sit, his hands clasped behind his back. "You've made a mess, James," he said, his tone cutting. "Alicia's presentation was revelation. And what did you do? You belittled her in front of everyone, made a spectacle of your arrogance." James opened his mouth to protest, but Carter raised a hand, silencing him. "Don't. The board's talking. The team's talking. And none of it's good for you. Alicia is leading the new initiative with Dr. Vance, and she's proving herself invaluable. You've lost their respect." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "You're off the key projects. Focus on the basics, and maybe, just maybe, you'll claw your way back." James's stomach churned, his voice a rasp. "Sir, I can fix this. I didn't know." Carter cut him off. "You didn't know because you didn't. Caretu, get your house in order, James, or you'll be out of this one." The dismissal was final, and James left the wand to Diso office, his face burning. The city skyline now a taunt of his diminished stature across town. Alicia stood in the air living room of Dr. Eleanor Vance's penthouse, sunlight streaming through wide windows, illuminating shelves lined with books and awards. The space was warm, a haven of intellect and encouragement, a stark contrast to the cold apartment she left behind. Alicia wore a simple blouse and slacks, her auburn hair pulled back, her hands clutching a notebook filled with ideas for the sustainability initiative. Vance sat across from her, her gray eyes warm, but discerning. "You're finding your footing?" she said, her voice a blend of mentor and ally. "The gala was just the start. Alicia, you've got a voice. Use it." Alicia nodded, her fingers tracing the notebook's edge. "I've been so used to staying quiet, letting James take the lead. But now," she trailed off, her eyes bright with resolve. "I'm done hiding." Vance smiled, a rare softness in her stern features. "Of good. You're not just brilliant. You're necessary. The industry needs you, and I'll make sure you have every opportunity to shine." Alicia's chest swelled, the weight of years. Under James's shadow lifting with each word of affirmation, she felt like herself again, or perhaps for the first time, unburdened by the need to prove her worth to a man who'd never seen it. That evening, as Alicia reviewed her notes, her phone buzzed with another message from James. "Alicia, I'm sorry. I didn't see you. Let me fix this." She stared at the screen, her heart steady, no longer swayed by his pleas. She remembered his laughter, his casual cruelty, the way he dismissed her before. Friends, family, and now colleagues. "No, James," she murmured, deleting the message. "I deserve better." The act was small but seismic, a severing of the ties that had bound her to his ego. She turned back to her work, her pen moving with purpose, her mind alive with ideas that were hers alone. James, meanwhile, walked through the office corridors, the hum of activity a stark contrast to his isolation. Emma passed him, her smile, polite but distant, a reminder of the loyalty he'd lost. Whispers followed them, snippets of arrogant and fool, and He caught a glimpse of a memo praising Alicia's work with Vance. His chest tightened, the reality of his fall sinking in. He'd been the golden boy, the one destined for greatness. But now, he was a cautionary tale. His name tied to a mistake he couldn't undo. Alicia was rising, her star burning bright, while he stumbled in the dark, his apologies unanswered. His pride, a shattered relic of the man he'd been. Weeks had passed since the gala, but its aftershock still rippled through James's life, each one eroding the foundation he'd built on charm and bravado. The city's pulse throbbed outside his office window, but inside, the air was stale. Heavy with the weight of his diminished status, colleagues passed his desk with perfunctory nods, their conversations clipped, their eyes avoiding his. A week had passed since the gala, and Savannah's whispers had grown bolder, snippets of arrogant fool and poor. Alicia drifted through the office corridors like fog. James's once pristine reputation was fractured, reflecting a man he barely recognized. His phone lay silent, Alicia's number a ghost. Every unanswered message a fresh sting, reminding him how far she had risen while he had fallen. He slumped in his chair. The office hummed a distant drone. A memo on his desk praised Alicia's work on the sustainability initiative, her name in bold, alongside Dr. Eleanor Vance. James crumpled the paper, recalling the gala, her voice commanding the room, the applause that drowned out his mockery. He had been reassigned to menial tasks, while Alicia soared. A colleague, Tom, passed by with a casual jab. Heard Alicia at the global conference. Big deal. Ooh. James' forced smile felt like a grimace, pride bleeding with every mention of her name. Across town, Alicia stood on a stage, bathed in light. Hundreds of industry leaders filled the hall. Her auburn hair gleamed under the spotlights. Her tailored blazer, a symbol of authority. Dr. Vance had nominated her to speak, and Alicia addressed the crowd with confidence that felt like home. Sustainability isn't just a goal, she said, voice steady and vibrant. It's a responsibility shaped by every choice we make. Her slides were sharp, her anecdotes sparking nods and laughter. The audience leaned forward, captivated. Their applause swelled as she concluded, cementing her as a rising star. Media outlets hailed her as a new voice of innovation. Her name now shone where James's had once taken pride, back at Doctoration, Vance's penthouse. Alicia sat at her sleek desk, ideas spilling across the pages. The city lights framed the room, knowledge lining the shelves, a sanctuary of ambition. Vance approached, silver hair catching the glow. You own that stage today, she said. The world sees what I always knew. You're unstoppable. Alicia smiled. I spent so long in his shadow. I thought I needed his approval. But now, I'm enough. More than enough. Vance said, you're rewriting the rules. Alicia. Meanwhile, James sat in his darkened apartment. The television flickered with Alicia's image, radiant beside Dr. Vance. Her words and confidence, broadcast worldwide, contrasted sharply with his despair. He remembered mocking her at the gala, calling her not sharp enough. Now, the world applauded her, and he was a footnote. His phone buzzed. Alicia, I'm lost without you. I see it now. Please. He stared, heart aching, but her words echoed. I deserve better. He deleted the message, realizing she was no longer his to define. At the office, the shift was palpable. Emma, once neutrale, now openly praised Alicia in meetings, voice carrying Keith défiance. Others followed, conversations orbiting Alicia's achievements. James overheard two colleagues whisper, did you see her speech? She's a game changer. His face burned. Coffee trembled in his hand. The arrogance that had once made him golden now marked him as a cautionary tale. Alicia thrived. Advance's penthouse. Her vision for the sustainability initiative sharpened daily. Bold ideas. Decisive meetings. Her team inspired by her authority. One evening, finalizing a proposal, Vance stopped by. You're not just leading, Alicia. You're redefining leadership. Alicia's smile was radiant. For years, she had shrunk to fit James' world. Now, she expanded. Brilliance. Unconfined. Finally, the courtroom. A stark contrast to the gala's opulence. Fluorescent lights and wood-paneled walls cast cold clarity. Alicia sat at the plaintiff's table, composed. Auburn hair pulled back. Her tailored suit, a testament to authority. James, rumpled and hollow-eyed, sat across. The judge's gavel hovered silently. The air thrummed with the weight of reckoning. Alicia's lawyer presented her case with precision. Years of verbal assault. Public humiliation at the gala. Theft of her work. Emma testified, recounting mocking words. Not sharp enough. Just stand there and look pretty. Mr. Carter, the company patriarch, condemned James's arrogance. Each word tightened the noose around his pride. Finally, Alicia spoke. I loved him once, she told the judge, but he saw me as a prop, not a partner. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to be free. Her words carried the quiet power she had shown on stage. The gavel fell, granting her divorce, severing the ties to James' cruelty. The courtroom emptied. James lingered, diminished, undone by his own hubris. Alicia stepped into her new office at company headquarters. Sleek windows framing the city pulse. Notes for the sustainability initiative cluttered her desk. Her vision took shape under Dr. Vance's guidance. You've escaped his cage. Alicia, Vance said, now fly as high as you can. I will. Eleanor, Alicia said, heart-light, resolve, unshakable. For the first time, I'm not afraid. James, alone, watched news clips, replay her speeches. Headlines heralded her as the industry's new star. Every article, a knife twisting deeper into regret. His messages pleading for forgiveness went unanswered. Her silence spoke louder than any rebuke. Alicia thrived. Her brilliance, once dimmed by his scorn, now illuminated the world. James' laughter at the gala, once a weapon, became his shackle, chaining him to regret. She rose radiant and free, while he faded into the shadow of his own arrogance. Her journey was a testament to the quiet fire within, a reminder that resilience and self-worth cannot be stolen. Alicia had emerged victorious, leaving James to reckon with the wreckage of his hubris. Her star, ascending as his dimmed into oblivion, the courtroom had cleared, but the echoes of Alicia's words lingered, a quiet power that filled the air long after the gavel fell. James remained behind, shoulders slumped, the weight of his arrogance finally crushing him. Outside, Alicia stepped into the crisp sunlight, her auburn hair catching the city's glow, her posture straight, resolute. Each step toward her new office was a declaration she would no longer be diminished by anyone. Her office at the company headquarters was alive with possibility. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the bustling city, and her desk was covered with notes, proposals, and charts detailing the sustainability initiative she had envisioned. Colleagues moved through the space with purpose, inspired by her energy and vision. Alicia had become more than a rising star. She was a force shaping the future of her industry. Dr. Vance entered, a quiet smile on her face. You've claimed your space. Alicia, she said, voice warm. Now lead it boldly. You're not just working, you're transforming the way this company and maybe this world thinks. Alicia's heart swelled. I will. Eleanor, I've waited years to step into this without fear. Now I can. Meanwhile, James sat in his apartment, the once pristine space now cluttered and dark. The news played again. Alicia's radiant image dominating the screen, her voice steady and commanding. Every segment, every article, every headline was a dagger. He remembered mocking her at the gala, laughing at her ambition. Now, the applause belonged to her. He was invisible, a cautionary tale of arrogance and cruelty. Messages he had sent pleas, apologies, promises to change remained unanswered. Alicia had moved on, and the reality hit him harder than any confrontation could. He wandered through the empty rooms of his apartment, a ghost in the life he had once taken for granted. Every memory of belittling her was a chain, linking him to regret he could not escape. Back in her office, Alicia reviewed a new proposal late into the evening. Her team was energized, their ideas flowing seamlessly into her vision. Each project was an opportunity to lead, to shape the company culture she had dreamed of. Equitable, innovative, and respectful. Vance stopped by once more, her eyes glinting with pride. You're not just leading, Alicia, you're redefining leadership itself. Alicia is mild, the weight of years spent shrinking for others lifting with every word. She thought of James's last desperate message, I'm lost without you. I see it now. She felt no pity, only clarity. He had thrived on her diminishment. His regret, however heartfelt, was irrelevant now. She deleted the message and moved forward, her brilliance unshackled. As weeks passed, Alicia's presence transformed the company. Meetings she led were efficient, yet inspiring. Teams were motivated by her vision and clarity. Employees who had once doubted their voice now found themselves heard and empowered. Each day was a victory over the years of belittlement she had endured. James, by contrast, sank further into isolation. The office he had once dominated became a labyrinth of whispers and sidelong glances. Every mention of Alicia's accomplishments was a reminder of his failure. Colleagues avoided eye contact or offered curt nods. He was no longer golden. He was a shadow, defined by the arrogance that had brought him low. Then came the annual industry conference, a stage similar to the one where Alicia had first shined. She stepped forward as keynote speaker, welcomed with admiration and anticipation. Her speech was flawless, data precise, anecdotes compelling, a vision of sustainable innovation that captivated every listener. The applause that followed was thunderous, not a murmur but a wave that washed over her and her audience alike. Media outlets called her a visionary, a game-changer, and the voice of a new era. Back at her office, Alicia allowed herself a quiet moment. The journey from silence to authority had been long, fraught with doubt, shadowed by James' cruelty. But every slight, every stolen idea, every moment of belittlement had been transformed into fuel for her ascent. She had claimed her space, her voice, her dignity. James' final reckoning came quietly. No dramatic confrontation, no public apology, just the awareness of how far she had gone without him. He was a man tethered to his own mistakes. A cautionary example of pride undone by its own weight. Alicia's life, her career, her brilliance, continued upward untainted by him, unshakable, unstoppable. In the quiet of her office, Alicia looked out over the city. The skyline glimmered like possibility itself. She breathed deeply, letting the triumph settle into her bones. She had survived cruelty, reclaimed her voice, and built a future on her own terms. The fire that had once simmered quietly inside her now burned brightly, illuminating not only her path, but the way forward for all who would follow her example. Alicia had emerged victorious. She had taken the shadows cast by James's arrogance and transformed them into light, her own brilliance. uncontained and inspiring. The story of her triumph was not just about success, but about reclaiming self-worth, demanding respect, and refusing to be diminished. She was free. She was radiant. And she was only beginning